working with other people, choosing your managerial approach, how to lead teams, run meetings, build your network, and tell business stories. So this is like a taster of some of the kind of areas that I think are most particularly valuable, and some of my very favourite frameworks are in here as well. So let's get cracking. First one, working with other people. So I think in order to collaborate effectively, the first thing that you need to do is just to recognise and acknowledge that different people have different types of personalities and like working in different ways. Just acknowledging that is the good head start. And that helps you to recognise those differences and, where necessary, where appropriate, to adapt how you engage with people. And there are lots, you'll have come across lots of personality profiling things, I'm sure, over your life, actually. But I find this one, I'm particularly proud of the way I put it together, actually. And it's there are several ones similar to this. Because I think the simpler the better, because they can be more easily applied. And so if you, broadly, there are these sort of tendencies. One, let's start at the top, getting it right. I'm just going to crib from my own book, actually, to remember. Yeah, so you can tell people who like to get it right because they have a focus on, they're very measured. They tend to be quite logical and precise and often succinct and like facts and figures. There are also some behavioural traits of people who tend to be like this, tend to be a little bit less tactile, not always, but sometimes less likely to maintain eye contact, things like that. So you've got that sort of trait. Then you've got the trait on the right, and I've tried to just banging, it's a bit aggressive really, but anyway, putting your fist down sort of thing, maybe too aggressive, which is where the focus is on getting it done. That sense of urgency. They tend to be quite authoritative figures, the people who are strong on this trait. More confident, firm handshake, that kind of behaviour. Then you have the third one, which is people who love learning new stuff, experimenting with new stuff, innovating. They love, they're very energetic, usually quite charismatic, keen to explore and talk too much. As you can tell already, I lean in that direction very much myself. And then finally, there's getting on well. And this is people who have a strong trait in being welcoming, nurturing, enjoy harmony, are very sociable, etc., and tend to bring people together. So hopefully you'll recognise those four traits. And I thought we'd do a quick poll now, where if you could vote on which of these four tendencies you personally identify more strongly with. So hopefully...
So we've got the poll open, so we'll just give it a few more moments for everyone to answer. But just so the audience knows, we will have Q&A at the end. So please, if you do have any questions throughout this webinar, please type them in. Obviously, we'll put forward the questions just down in the Q&A section. So we're pretty much there, so I'll close the poll.
Wow, that was quick. That's good.
And share the results with you. You should see them on your screen now.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, I can. Yeah, okay, so, right, getting it right and getting on well are the two slightly bit higher than getting it done and getting somewhere new. Quite a balance, actually. That's good. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense given the profile of people I expect who are on this group, but also it's a good balance. I have been in businesses and teams where everyone is in the top one or two, and that's not always very effective. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. So that's brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Paul. Oh, I should say as well, these aren't like categories. It's not like I'm a getting it right person through and through. People vary depending on circumstances and settings, could evolve a bit over time, and also you can have elements of one and others. Have a preference in one or two areas, not just one. But yeah. Now, the reason, obviously this kind of profiling can be very helpful to your own personal development, but I particularly like this framework for using it to help you work well with other people. Now, the very best thing you can do if you want to work well with someone is to get to know them. Just ask them questions, find out what their priorities are, find out the ways they like to work. Ask them directly in many cases. And I would always recommend that's the best thing you can do, especially when you first work with somebody. However, it's sometimes useful in business to sort of sense which of these personality traits someone has, particularly like in new business, when you're trying to persuade someone of something, but you don't know them well enough yet and you haven't had a chance get to know them. In which case, by using those behavioural traits, like and the sense that you get, you can sort of maybe predict what kind of person they are. And even if you don't, and even if later on you do find out, this next grid is extremely useful if you have a sense of other people and what their traits are, because how you handle people should and can vary dramatically depending on their preferences. So, for example, if you want to persuade someone, then if you're trying to talk to a getting it done type personality, you focus on the end result. But if you want to persuade someone who's getting on well, you might persuade them by talking about how great it will feel when the whole team works together to succeed in whatever it is. So a very different angle, even if it's the same thing you need to persuade someone to actually get on with. What's another good example? Yeah, in terms of what you should respect, always for someone who gets it right, often they can be more private people, so respect that. Whereas someone who likes to get somewhere new, you should respect their kind of hunger to express themselves. Give them platforms to do that. And look, set objectives. That's just, I could go on. I could go on and on about this slide because I find it so useful. But for example, give responsibility for. If you want someone who likes getting it right, give them responsibility for accuracy in a project. If it's getting on well, give them a responsibility maybe within the team to help the team development, etc. Anyway, you can look at this at your leisure in recording. Okay, so that's the first section. That's about getting on with people. The next one is about managerial approach. And I think it's true to say that every individual will develop their own personal managerial style, one that works for them personally. However, a good manager will be able to adapt their managerial approach, at least, depending on the circumstances. And I've come up with this grid. I've read a lot about this and tried to distill it again into a framework, which I'm quite happy with, which is, for example, in a scenario, let's go to the bottom row first, where you're working with an experienced individual or individuals, and we're talking about, a low-risk project, or there's low risk in the business at the moment or whatever, then that's a good opportunity to give those experienced people a lot of freedom to basically go off and run things themselves, which is lovely for the manager because they don't have to do so much. Always being there when help's required, but giving free rein. However, if something happens or there's a crisis or an absolutely critical project, then even with an experienced team, it can work best if you say, look, we're all in this together, we're all experienced, let's work as a team and figure this out to solve the crisis. Which is very different if you're working with an inexperienced individual or team. Whereas in a crisis, you can't afford for them to get it wrong. They probably don't have the skills yet to do it. It's not worth you taking the risk. What you'll do is be much more, you'll be directive. You'll tell them what to do. So you can see, depending on the experience level and the risk level, you can adapt your style to be a more effective manager and to help your team develop. The other one I wanted to share with you in the sort of managerial area is an approach I've used more than any other ever. I was lucky to learn this early on in my career, and it's foolproof. And the beautiful thing about this is it will apply to almost any circumstance. This coaching approach actually works even if you don't know anything about the subject matter that you're helping someone with. So I'll just quickly go through that. It's just a process you go through when someone is trying to solve something or has an issue, and you're, for example, their manager, or it doesn't have to be a manager, it can just be a colleague, anything. So you start by helping the person to clarify, what is the goal? What's the end result? What do you need to achieve? Sometimes just sitting down and helping someone have clarity on the goal helps, and everything else just falls into place. Not always, but sometimes. So that is a valuable thing to do as a manager. Then the next one is just a straightforward, okay, well, what's the current reality? How far along, how close to the goal are you? Where are the gaps? Where are the difficult gaps? What's the gap? And again, that helps people really focus, therefore, on what they need to do. And therefore, the next one is kind of like the person will naturally start to think, well, I could do this, or maybe I need to do that, or I could do this instead, or I'm not sure about that. The next part of the process is to ask them, okay, well, what are these different options? Pin them down, write them down even. And again, that's almost what you're doing there, is helping the person to think of how to solve their own problem. And then finally, sometimes there's more than one option to achieve the same thing. You ask the person, well, what will you do? And then you get them to commit. And that act of committing will often reveal whether or not, which is the right option, because if they commit to one and then realise, oh no, that really won't work, it can help them actually finalise what they really should be doing. That is foolproof. I use it all the time, and I would highly recommend you scribble that one down. I really, 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 really would, if you don't know it already, that is. Okay, third section. This is about teams, leading teams. So there's a lot of clear evidence that the most effective teams have these 4 different things in place. So one is goals. Excuse me a second. Yeah. In other words, every team needs to know why it exists, what it is there, what it needs to contribute if it's part of a wider organisation, etc. What its role, the team's overall role is. Sometimes that's not clear, especially for well-established companies and teams. Secondly, roles. So everyone within the team needs to be really clear about what they're supposed to do and how that relates to other people in the team, and where the handoffs are, etc. And again, if you've got teams with overlapping or ambiguous responsibilities, that's when you start to get problems and conflict. So that's essential to get those clear at any one time. Then the third one are classic kind of team rules. So this is usually processes or practices that people, by joining the team, they agree to work in this particular way. It can be something as practical as they must always fill out their timesheet. It might be a particular way they agree to work, etc. And then the fourth one is values. Now, values is a little bit different because these are more principles, really, rather than hard and fast rules of the way that people in the team are expected to contribute, to behave. So I'll just pick out a few from my book. So, for example, ones I found useful are things like, we expect everyone in the team to identify opportunities for the team to become more effective. So it's a kind of a thing we do as a team is we always try and innovate, like a Kaizen approach, as they call it in Japan. Or it could be that everyone is expected to contribute to an inclusive environment in which everyone can express their thoughts and feelings. So in other words, by having these values, it means if someone is not living up to them, then everyone has the right and the duty almost to call them out on it, because it's a shared value of a group of people working together. The third one I quite like is also we expect fellow team members, to support people when they're under time or emotional pressure. So like a human value. In other words, if someone is under real stress of some sort, then other team members are expected to help out if they can. So that's the kind of thing I mean by value. So again, a quick poll I think we'll do here, Paul. So this is asking, in the teams that you've been in throughout at any time in your life, is which of these 4 ingredients have been missing most often, in your opinion?
Excellent, Dan. So we've got the poll open. So we're just going to let everyone answer the question.
Brilliant, thank you.
So, it shouldn't be too long.
Paul, have we had any questions in yet or not?
We haven't had any questions in yet. So obviously just let everyone know. If you've got any questions throughout, just type them in. And obviously we do have around 10 to 15 minutes at the end where we'll have a Q&A section. And we can put these forward to Dan. And obviously if we do have a lot of questions, don't worry, these will get passed on to Dan afterwards and we'll be able to get in touch directly with you. So we're about there, so I'll end the poll and I can share the results with you. So it should pop up on your screen now. Okay.
Oh, values, right, yes. I'm not too surprised. So yeah, pretty even for goals. Paul, can everyone see these results, or is it just me?
Everyone should be able to see.
Okay, cool. Just to check. Yeah, so as you can see, values is the one that's most often missing. Interestingly, I found in my career, values was the biggest discriminator, and well, probably because it's most often missing, between really strong teams and really weak teams. And in fact, some of the best teams I've been either in or leading have been where, when the team was formed, it worked together. to develop what the values are, because obviously values aren't easily imposed on people. They should come from the group of people themselves. And once those values are in place, then other people joining, it's sort of self-fulfilling, because you look for people who are going to fulfill those values. So it can, there's a video I can recommend if you ask me, if people get in touch later, of Apple in the early days, about how very strong their sense of values are and how they'd look for them in new recruits, for example. And actually, it comes through as quite a common ingredient of a lot of the most successful companies and brands as well, having a strong company value, usually led by the founder. Okay, cool. So that's the sort of team charter, if you like. And then there's the sort of team composition. This sunflower is to help me remember that good teams, strong teams, have between the team members people who are able and do contribute these different things towards the team. So it's not like a one-to-one. It's not like you have one person doing each of the things on this sunflower. And small teams, then people will fulfill multiple roles. But a strong team will have all of these in place somehow. And I think it starts with direction leading up to belief. So in other words, there needs to be someone who provides clear direction in what the team is trying to do and instills that sense of belief. Almost always, or most commonly, the leader of the team. It provides both of those, although sometimes there can be someone else who really helps on the side of, on the belief side. Maybe someone who's very passionate, who works very closely with the leader, who provides the passion and belief along with the direction from the leader. So that's the sort of first thing. And CEOs are often providing those things, for example, in a company. Then you need people who are going to provide practicality and rigor. So practicality means making sure things are feasible and viable, and rigor means that the analysis has been done well. So at a company level, you might have a chief operating officer for practicality, or a head of HR, and for rigor, the CFO often provides that rigor, of course, because money's a big part of that. But you also need people who come up with ideas, creative people who can help inject thinking that might unlock problems, help overcome problems, or provocation. People who, although people like that can be very annoying, they're essential to an effective team. And they're not annoying because I shouldn't have said that. They should be valued because provocation is an important part of providing checks and balances to make sure that the decisions are right and people aren't just doing what they did before, for example. And then in terms of harmony and clarity, a team will fall over if it doesn't have sufficient people contributing clarity about what's going on and why it's going on, and harmony, so everyone gets on and is functional. And again, in my experience, they can come from any role. It doesn't tend to align with a particular function, although it does tend to be stronger amongst certain of the personality preferences we saw before. So if the use of this is when you're forming a team, especially larger teams, make sure you have a good mix of people who can fill these different roles within your team. And if one's missing, try and find someone to help strengthen the team. Cool. So meetings. Now, the reason I picked out this, even though it seems a very specific, almost tactical topic, is that I believe that it's something that is sorely needed in the business world. So this poll, don't put it up yet, Paul, but I just wanted to give a bit of context first, is I ran this on LinkedIn about a year ago, and I'm very curious to see if and that was actually quite a small sample size. It closed after about 100 people. But I'm curious with this much, quite a lot larger sample size, or hopefully a bit larger. I can't remember how many we got before. Anyway, if we could do this vote, and I'll share with you the results and the results from before.
Excellent. So we've just made the poll go live. I've had a few questions come in just regarding the recording. They've joined a few a bit late. So just to let everyone know, today's session is being recorded, and obviously a week from today we will send you all an email which will give you an access link to obviously view the recording again. So don't worry you will have access to the recording. And obviously, we like to put forward as many questions to Dan in the Q&A section, so if you do have any questions, please get in touch and we'll be able to put them forward. There are around 85% who have answered, so we'll just give it a few more moments. Excellent. So I'll share the results with you now.
Thank you. Okay, so let's have a look. Yeah, it's broadly similar. So here, as you can see here, you've got, well, for a start, you've got 97 people saying yes, they have experienced that, and the balance within that is more people saying that yes, they've often been in a business meeting that was a complete waste of time. I thought I'd phrase that quite harshly, you know, that was a complete waste of time. And yet in this group, we've got more than half of people saying that, and that's the group on LinkedIn was even higher. It was, I think, 69% said yes often, and they're basically people who follow me, and they tend to be a bit older, people in their sort of 40s, 50s, 60s even. And 95% across the top two boxes. So yeah, it's a huge deal. So that's why I'm going to show you just a couple of useful tips that I found really exceptionally useful. So the first one is in terms of to avoid meetings being a waste of time. It really pays to kind of insist, if you can, that everyone adopts a process like this when setting up a meeting, and sending out the invitations effectively. And your nice acronym, SPORT. Some of you may have crossed the POST framework, which is very similar. This is subtly different, but slightly superior, I think, I hope. So you've got S, subject. That just means, what you call the meeting, what you put in the title when you send out the invitation, the topic, succinctly. P, preparation. So the key thing here, I think, is being clear at the invitation stage what people will need to do beforehand. And this can be anything. It could just be, collect your thoughts on topic X, or read through this material that's attached, etc. Or it could be, could X come prepare a summary of such and such, and which they will be sharing in the meeting, that kind of thing. Then the third one is outcome. Now the O is the most important one by far, as in if people take the time to describe clearly what they want to be the outcome of the meeting itself, not the outcome of the whole project, but the outcome of this particular meeting, that is so helpful. In fact, it's helpful to the person arranging the meeting, because as soon as they think of, right, this is the outcome we're going to aim to achieve, it automatically makes you think of who needs to be there and how long do you think it will take. It just helps you in your planning of the meeting. Roles, that's just so that everyone's clear what they'll be doing in the meeting, if they have a specific role, like to say something, share something, etc. So that it's another way of putting agenda, but it's much more clear. It's like such and such will be sharing this. And then of course timing is how long each section is meant to last. So obviously R&T are classically more like a classic agenda, really. So if that happens every time, you've got a good chance that the meeting was worthwhile in the first place, and secondly, that it's been well thought through. But in the meeting itself, it's also important that it's run in an efficient, productive way. And this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-step process helps do that. So I use this as my default. Obviously, you can adapt it however you need, but it works well as a default. You start with the chair, and this is the key role of the chair, is just to remind people at the start of why the meeting is important, the context, and right at the start, a reminder of the outcomes that are needed by the end, because that helps everyone to be more focused. So it's outcome, don't forget, that's what we're trying to achieve by the end of the meeting. Okay, number 2, you then have relevant information shared. Now, I'm pretty sure it's Jeff Bezos from Amazon who insists that everyone read silently for 15 minutes at the beginning of the meeting a pre-prepared document that outlines the issue that someone's prepared in advance. An alternative is for people to designated people to talk through the issue and provide the relevant information, context required for whatever the decision is. So that's number 2. Number 3 is important for inclusivity. So number 3 is asking each attendee in turn, usually with the chair coming last, almost always, to express their point of view on the issue, but without challenge. So people can ask points of clarification, but beyond that, no challenge, no debate yet. And that's important because that gives a good opportunity for people who are less confident about airing and sharing and interrupting others to be able to do it and put their thoughts across properly. And it's the chair's job to make sure that that's possible and no one undermines that. Then you can have a more broad debate around the topic now that everyone's shared their views. But again, the chair may need to make sure that everyone is contributing and has a chance to if they want to. Then, in an ideal situation, a consensus will be reached through discussion. If a decision has to be made and there isn't a consensus, that again is the role of the chair to say, okay, we don't have full agreement here, but this is the decision and my reasons are blah, 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 blah. So, for example, if two people debate two different options, say, and you can't get agreement because there's a difference in opinion about the relative importance of two factors, the chair might say, right, we're going to go with option B because in my opinion that's the rationale, that's more likely to happen or whatever. And then finally, any meeting, however big or small, even if it's 2 people or hundreds of people, should always end with the actions, obviously. What are we going to do? Who's going to do it? By when? What, who, when. If all meetings have that at the end, that's a good meeting, if a meeting has that at the end. Okay, so I recommend this if you find you've had challenges in whatever organisation you're working with, this can help a lot. Now networking. Now I did have a bit of a debate here about what would be most useful to share in terms of building your network, but I thought I'd draw on my recent experience of the benefit of having a network. Having just recently gone to become a freelancer after 30 years in corporate life, and it's kind of really I reflected on over the course of the career. You will build a group of people. You'll accumulate a group of people who are your advocates. People who really support you, like you, will recommend you, etc., etc., etc. And my guesstimate is you'll typically gain about 20 of those over 20 or 30 maximum over 30 years, maybe one a year, I don't know. Quite a relatively small group for a long time. Then you'll have others who are allies. In other words, you've given a good impression, given a good impression to them. They like working with you. They've worked with you in the past. They'd be happy probably to work with you again, almost certainly. So they're allies. And again, you might amass sort of 100 or so of those over your career. And then beyond that, you'll have a lot of associates. You'll have potentially many thousands of associates. Just people who will remember you work with or came across, and they'll remember you and hopefully you gave a good impression. But it's not a very strong relationship. And the important thing is to know who your advocates and your allies are and to keep in touch with them. To make sure you help them and they help you over the course of your career. So I did a list of all the assignments I've had since as a freelancer, and there were 18 different projects, effectively different assignments, and 14 of them came from prior people I already knew, advocates and allies. So one was for a former boss, another was a former line report, a former client, a former business partner, and several from former colleagues. So you can see how important it is to build your network of people who might be able to help you, and especially in the modern world where people are much more likely to be working freelance and moving around more than perhaps they were 20 years ago. And how to do that? Well, I actually think it's quite straightforward. It's all about just being a decent, conscientious human being. There is no other tips or tricks to be shared, I don't think. If you want to earn trust, then listen to people and be courteous. Listening skills are fundamental to building trust. Always be open and honest. Ideally know what you're talking about. Don't pretend to know stuff that you don't know about. Always keep your word. And if you do make a mistake, put your hand up. I mean, if you do those things, you will build trust. You will still make as many mistakes as other people, but that people will trust you. And obviously at the bottom here, it's effectively just the negatives, the converse of the factors above. So that's my sort of words of wisdom, so to speak. And the final section here is about telling business stories. So obviously storytelling is an important and growing skill in business. So I'm just going to, I think this is the final poll, Paul, about which film out of those 4 you like the most.
Excellent. So we've got the final poll up and ready for everyone to answer, and we've got some answers coming in. So just before we move to the poll, the results, I've had a question which has come in off the back of obviously discussing the framework. So they're asking, is the meeting framework different for virtual meetings or meetings where some are in the room and some are on the phone? I don't know if maybe if you could elaborate.
I'm more thinking, I don't think they are in this case. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I drafted this whole book before COVID hit, and then I actually did a complete rewrite because of the rapid increase in virtual working. No, I think the broad framework makes sense. Yeah, I mean, obviously, how you share information might be done differently. There might be better or worse ways of doing the information sharing bit. But I think the principle of going around and asking people in turn, for example, is universal. And obviously the sort of the sport preparation acronym, again, all of those things apply equally to both. So I think the way you do the interaction is different, but the principles that those particular frameworks I don't think are affected. I will have a proper think about that afterwards in case I've missed anything and feed it back. But yeah, I think so.
Excellent. So we've got the results, so I'll just share them with you now.
Oh, pretty even. That's interesting. Just for my own personal interest, I guess that Star Wars would be top and then Lord of the Rings, but it's actually the other way around slightly. Pretty even. Oh, but nice. Most of you liked at least one of those films. Okay, curious. There wasn't a lot of point to this apart from to introduce the topic, which is that all 4 of those movies there are based around a similar story structure. And in fact, it's something like 60% of all kind of major movie releases, not sort of indie ones necessarily, but major movie releases, big blockbustery things, follow this same structure called you may have come across, called the hero's journey. Often there's always in the hero's journey, there's a scene setting. And scene setting means where life is good, life is fine. The hobbits are having a lovely party. Luke Skywalker, what's he doing? He's on the farm. Things are fine, things are nice. Then you have the challenge. The challenge is presented suddenly out of nowhere often. Like Lord Voldemort is on his return, he's coming back. And obviously people are very worried about that. And with Lord Voldemort, you've got Harry Potter, who's going to need to be part of defeating Lord Voldemort, and he's scared by this prospect. So there's a lot of tension here. But then you need to offer hope. So in this case, you often have a what's the figure called? The role, the master. The person the advisor, Dumbledore, who will say to Harry, "You can do it. Don't worry. I'm here to offer support and guidance." Then the meat of the story, the bit that takes the most time anyway, is a series of challenges or quests, learning journey, where you often have a new challenge and you overcome it. And during this journey, the hero tends to develop and get stronger, learn new skills or develop in some emotional way as well, potentially, until they're finally capable of defeating the challenge, of overcoming the challenge. And then, of course, you have a bit at the end, which is the happy ending. So that's the framework. Now, the reason I'm talking all about movies and storylines is because this particular structure lends itself very well to business meetings and, in fact, even pitches as well, new business pitches. So I'll just show you how that works. So a classic default for a business storyline is you start with the context. You're talking, and in fact here it's quite important to make the audience feel proud of what the brand or the company or the organisation has achieved to this date so far. To be proud. Here's the context. Here's if you like, here's what we've got to lose. Okay. Then you present the challenge. Say, unfortunately, we're in the spirits market and everyone's now drinking loads of water and everything's in decline. Whatever. The challenge, and it, even if it's an opportunity, it's important to create attention here. Create tension here. In other words, Here's an opportunity we really mustn't miss out on, or if we don't seize it, a competitor will. There has to be tension. Okay, that's the challenge. Then the third one is the hope, offering hope. Say, but don't worry, thanks to this fantastic presentation you're about to see, we will shed light on the challenge and we'll know exactly what to do. And then you do it. Then typically you structure it into 3 parts, 3 acts, I suppose. Anyway, 3 sections, each around a particular message. And in each message, you give your kind of your point of view about the message, the points that argue for that point of view, the support, the data, plus ideally something to make it memorable. And then you might want to discuss the implications before you get on to sections B and then section C. And by the time you've built through A, B, and C, hopefully the implications should be clear and it can be a happy ending. This works brilliant for all sorts of different types of business meeting, like I said. So if you're ever stuck to think, well, how am I going to structure this? Maybe this will help. Right, so that's, we're all good timing. We're just at the conclusion of the snippets. So I've shown you 6 out of the 50 different topics covered in the the best-selling soft skills book. Also available, like I said at the beginning, the Smart Marketing book for anyone who's interested in marketing as well. So there's the adverts. If you want to follow up, get in touch, see some of my other things, or feel free to follow me. I'm Dan White 1000, or Dan White Author of the Smart Marketing book, as I've shown here. And I've also got a website. Now this has got a lot, it's based around all my frameworks and drawings. It hasn't got all the soft skills stuff on it, but it has a lot around marketing and business and marketing. So for example, here are just a snippet of some of the visuals and frameworks that I include in that section. And within each one, I also explain the framework and when you might use it and give you handy links to sort of further reading if you require it.